Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv S. Khanna for Immigration.com, the law offices of Rajiv S. Khanna, PC. I wanted to inform our community and our clients real quickly, in a nutshell, what to expect about immigration reform, what is influencing immigration reform as of today, January 5, 2014. Tomorrow, that's January 6, Congress gets back into session. Can we expect immigration law to be voted upon? Which way it's going to go? So let's just take a quick look at various things that are playing upon and influencing the decisions regarding immigration law. Party lines. First of all, we have to look at um, the one of the most major influencers is whether somebody is a Democrat or they are a Republican. Generally speaking, Democrats they have come out in favor of immigration reform. Republicans, the polarization and the differences in opinion are a little bit more complicated. There are those whose constituencies generally favor immigration reform, such as those with very high percentage of um, Hispanic or other immigrant voters, or people who are U.S. citizens but still are in favor of um, larger immigration and better immigration reform. Those kind of constituencies, the Republican members of Congress who are coming from those constituencies tend to be a lot more towards geared towards immigration reform being enacted. Those whose constituencies opposing immigration reform naturally are opposed to it. Then there are those that are neutral. You also have to look at another influencer, whether somebody is sitting in the House or in the Senate. Usually, senators tend to be, I won't say it is always so, but usually senators tend to be more moderate in their opinions in most things because senators come from a statewide constituency. They are not districted according to small areas like members of the House of Representatives are. So representatives come from districts which are much smaller within the same state, whereas senators come from statewide constituencies. Uh, House members are generally more polarized because they're coming from smaller areas. Senate elections are statewide, they're generally in favor of immigration reform. Then you've got individual influencers. There are a lot of people. There must be at least a couple of hundred people who are influencing at an individual level. But I'm naming the most important right now. This could change tomorrow. John Boehner, Republican, Congressman John Boehner, member of the House of Representatives, and the Speaker of the House. Um, he appears to be, he was the one holding up on immigration reform because he gets to decide what gets voted upon. Um, in the House, he appears to be moving in favor of reform. He's hired a lady by the name of Rebecca Talent, who's an experienced immigration handler. She used to be with Senator John McCain's office, and she's well known in the immigration circles as somebody who understands the issues in immigration. The only reason we can think of people who are observing what is going on, um, the hiring of Rebecca Talent would be made necessary if John Boehner wanted to move in favor of some kind of reform. Another hopeful sign was when John Boehner made the budget deal, he made some public and quite vocal comments about extremists within the Republican Party, like the Tea Party. So he marginalized them, and that's always a good sign for any legislation where there is polarization between the extremists and the moderates. So when the majority moderates get up and say, "Look, you guys are just a little too extreme for our taste. We don't want to listen to you anymore," that's a good sign. Um, and I just mentioned that the Speaker of the House is important, because he gets to decide which bill gets voted upon. In fact, what happened was Senate had passed a comprehensive 1,000+ page immigration reform package, but it never got voted upon in the House because Boehner didn't put it forward. There's all kinds of politics there, something called Hastert rule. I don't want to get into that. I just want to talk about the major influences. But the bottom line is that um, Boehner gets to decide what gets voted upon. Therefore, it is important for us to look at him as an influencer. On the opposite side, Ted Cruz, Republican, he is the voice of immigration reform opposition. We look at him as well. Again, not too much activity that we can complain about right now, but as the new session of Congress goes along, we'll see what happens. Bob Goodlatte is another important Republican member of the House whom we have to watch because he is the chair of the Judiciary Committee of the House. So he gets to decide the proceedings of what gets passed, what bill gets passed from the Judiciary Committee onto the full House, where it gets into the hands of John Boehner. He generally is in favor of small bills instead of a comprehensive reform and tough border protection and internal enforcement. That is the agenda of most Republicans today. Almost all Republicans, well, not all, but almost all Republicans are are in favor of these three things: smaller bills, and I should rephrase that: Republicans in the House, not necessarily on the Senate side. So they all want smaller bills, tougher border protection, and tougher internal enforcement. Um, then other individual influencers are the leaders within the House and the Senate. There are whips, there are um, majority leaders, there are so many different judicial committee chairs and members, etc. Like in the Senate, we had the gang of eight who was instrumental in coming together from both parties, um, coming together and putting together a reform package. So there are all these people. One person that I can think of is Paul D. Ryan on the House side, who was instrumental in bringing about the compromise on the budget. So he could be another voice to watch. I haven't mentioned him, but there are too many people to really mention. President, can he do anything? Well, he can try to use his political goodwill and credibility, but the problem is this red line that's going up from this is actually connecting to another topic that talks about failure of or very poor implementation of healthcare. So when that happens, the president loses his goodwill and credibility, and he becomes sort of marginalized in that. Okay, so I'm not sure president can do much at this point, but of course they can. His office can continue to use their good offices to try to bring people around to the cause of immigration reform. But that's an indirect and a relatively mild um, pressure on immigration reform at this time. There are Republican extremes, Tea Party, Heritage Foundation. These are organizations that are radically and diametrically opposed to the moderate view. They don't want to see any reform happen at all. Then we have businesses, labor unions, religious leaders, etc. Most of these are in favor of reform, and they've come out and said so. So individuals from these sectors, again, there are too many to mention. Mark Zuckerberg, and there's so many. I really can't get into. Uh, there are too many to mention. We have to look at the events that have been happening as well, because they will influence the outcome of immigration reform. For example, poor implementation of healthcare. It started very poorly. The website failed, but now a million plus people have signed, so things may be a little bit better. But what happens is this can create genuine doubt about the government's ability to handle implementation of laws. Hence people can assume government cannot be trusted with immigration. It's also likely to be used as an excuse by opponents of immigration reform um, to say that, look, we can't really trust this government, and we want tougher border security and enforcement as precondition to reform, and this government is not capable of doing it. Okay, so events such as these, this is just one event that I've taken, events such as these could have bearing on merits as well as when the immigration reform gets voted upon. Um, the budget deal was a good sign as an event because here, as I mentioned earlier, the um, extremes within the Republican Party were marginalized, and the deal was made against their vehement opposition. We have to remember another influencer is legal versus illegal immigration. Consensus of opinion is that we need legal immigration reform. no question about it. And consensus of opinion also is that we need to do something about the Dreamers. The Dream Act, protecting those people who were brought to the United States as very, very young um, children who had no influence over where their parents went. So if their parents entered the United States without documentation, consensus of the opinion is they should not be punished for it. I think legal immigration and the DREAM Act are probably the least controversial in principle of the reforms that might be proposed. And I won't be surprised if these two get attention from Congress first. Um, Within the undocumented folks, there is the path to citizenship, which is tied up with three issues. So if you're undocumented, how do you get to become a U.S. green card holders and then become a U.S. citizen? And there are three issues tied up there. Border security, as I said, Republicans want to see a tougher border security. Internal enforcement, I mentioned that. Then something that came up in the last 3 months was a longer path to immigration or no path at all. Both options will have to be considered, it looks like. There may be some compromises that have to be made. Um, I don't know what the final shape of this issue will be, but initially when we started, there appeared to be a lot of resistance from pro-immigration lobby to deal with piecemeal immigration reform instead of one solid chunk. But now, in the last few months, that position has become more moderate, and there may be a compromise possible. We'll see how that works, but that's definitely an influencer. I talked about the Dreamers. This is another important fact. 2014 is an election year. What does that mean? That means all 435 seats in the House are open for re-election, and 1/3 of Senate, 33 seats, are up for re-election. Okay, that means there may be a lot of influence about keeping my seat or winning my seat based upon what my constituency wants. So this is one of the very major influencers within immigration reform. Republicans will want to maintain control of the House, and they would want to take control of the Senate. Um, they will need Hispanic votes and support. Long term, there are agencies like or organizations like Heritage Foundation who have um, voiced their concerns that the new votes that are generated from legalization will not be in favor of Republicans in the long run. So there are all these considerations, and in election year, these things become a little bit more heightened. Okay. Um, Another influencer was, do we want to do one large bill or small ones? Like I said, generally Republicans in the House want to see a series of small bills. I think that's where we are going to go. And Republicans are also unfavorably comparing comprehensive immigration reform with the massive healthcare reform law dubbed Obamacare. They say, well, look at how bad the Obamacare law is, and we don't want to see the same thing happen um, in immigration reform. Remember also, a very important influencer of where immigration law goes is what business is before Congress tomorrow. Okay, they could be talking about healthcare. That's an important talking topic for them because they can beat up on Obamacare and hopefully win some votes depending upon the constituency they come from. Budget, debt ceilings, unemployment benefits, minimum wages, farm bill, Iran sanctions bill. They have all these different agenda items, and it all depends upon what takes precedence over the others. Only time will tell, but in a nutshell, these are the influencers. If you want to have a copy of this little drawing that I have made, little mind map that I have made, send me an email to help@immigration.com, help@immigration.com, media folks, media@immigration.com. We'll be happy to share it with you for whatever that is worth. Um, and we intend to keep this updated. So as time goes by, I hope to be able to add and modify information in this. I thank you for listening in. Every other Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we host free community conference calls. Everybody is welcome to join. Some people post questions ahead of time. You can take membership in our forums. All of the details are there on our website, immigration.com. You can take membership ahead of time, and it's instantaneous. It happens right away. And post your questions beforehand, or you can just log in. The phone number and all are provided: 202-800-8394, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time every other Thursday. We have free apps for both Apple iOS platform for your iPhones and iPads, as well as for Android. Just look for immigration.com, the period dot, and the application should show up.